All right, and we're recording. So, welcome. Welcome to Food and Mood. I am very excited to be having this conversation. My name is Jana. We have with us Josh and Steven. And just to give you a little bit of insight about what we're going to be doing today, we're going to be talking about how food impacts our mood and vice versa. We think that, and as we were just speaking, like before we hopped on, that this is a conversation that not a lot of people are having, and like, why? Like, why not? And so we are excited to be bringing you that information today. A little bit on housekeeping. Use the chat for any kind of comments like, wow, I never knew that, or oh my God, like mind blowing. Um, or if you have any questions, also put them in there. I will be kind of acting as the moderator, so keeping track in that sense. And with that being said, I'm going to go over a bit of an agenda just so that you can have an idea of what to expect today. And then we're going to jump right into it. So we're going to have Josh recapping us from Nutrition Basics. Then we're going to hop right into the content. I'm going to go over some pre-submitted questions and answers, and then we're going to open it up to anyone here today watching live has any questions so that we can answer those for you and have more of like an interactive discussion. And then we'll just tell you where to find us if you want to follow and learn more. So with that being said, just to give you an idea of like who we are and like what, kind of even qualifies Josh and Steven to be having this conversation, like who am I? So Josh is a nutrition coach. He currently holds certifications from Cornell and NASM, and he currently works with clients virtually to help them figure out how to make foods work for them instead of against them. Stephen is an experienced coach. He is skilled in community engagement and creating strong social interactions through health and wellness. He has degrees in cellular and molecular neuroscience and physiology with a focus on biochemistry and biophysiology. And he currently works with clients to help them improve their relationship with food and their bodies and to create a transformation from the inside out. My name is Jonna. I am a Journey certified life coach, and I have a background in functional fitness. And I currently work with clients to help them feel good about their bodies by increasing their confidence, building better relationships with themselves and others, and setting meaningful goals with a game plan to actually help them achieve them. So now that you know who we are, why we're here, we're going to jump right into it. Josh is going to set the stage by just telling us a little bit about what we spoke about last month in terms of nutrition basics. So if you would tell us like what the recap was.
Yeah, so I guess the main thing that we talked about is kind of distinguishing between real foods and fake foods, and so that's kind of the big thing that people have a question about, especially if they've never made an attempt to eat healthy or eat whole foods, and it's something that is new to them. So whole foods are going to be one ingredient foods. There are no guessing and what's in them. These are going to be foods that don't have ingredients list on them, and typically these are going to be the foods that you find in the U around the grocery store, in the produce section, meat section. These are going to be whole foods. Processed foods are things that are packaged, um, heavily marketed. These are going to be the things that are in the middle of the grocery store in the aisles, and that typically, whenever you look at the ingredients list, they're going to have a lot of ingredients in them, more than one ingredient. And these are going to be the foods that are typically bad for you and that are going to be full of like omega-6 3 fatty acids that we talked a little bit about last time. Sugar, trans fat, and all the other things that are bad for you that cause weight gain, type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance, and things that are contributing factors whenever we talk about heart disease and cardiovascular disease as well. We talked a lot about omega-6, which is found in a lot of processed foods, and these are, hydrogenated oils, and these are things that cause inflammation. And so I think one of the main things that we talked about that I wanted people to kind of understand is that whenever we talk about inflammation, a lot of times we think about like injuries, and we chat a little bit because I recently had a knee injury, and we think of inflammation as like, oh, I hurt my knee's swollen, or I hurt a certain area, things that are external. We can have internal inflammation too as well, and a lot of those things can lead to disease, and those things can be acute and chronic too as well. And whenever we talk about those things, whenever we talk about chronic, those things lead to chronic diseases. And a lot of things that are actually preventable when we avoid those processed foods that are high in sugar, high in refined and processed carbs, high in omega-6 fatty acids. And so, we wanted to kind of distinguish that fat isn't the problem. It's the type of fats that we are consuming, things that we should be eating when it comes to fat, like natural fats or, grass-fed butter, cold press or extra virgin olive oil. These are the fats that we're going to be wanting to use whenever we cook. And we want to, stay away from the vegetable oils and margarines and other things like that, because those are the things that are detrimental to our health. Another thing that we talked about that I think is extremely important is to understand that these food companies are not on your side, and we put so much trust, and I think it's just because that in the years that we're living in 2020 and 2021, it's easier to let people make decisions for us whenever we go in the grocery store. And we can look at a package and it can say high protein, low carb, and immediately trust the front of that package that says high protein, low carb, and not actually dive in a little bit deeper and look at the ingredients list and see what that food actually has in it. So it's just really important that these food companies, they're in it to make money. That is their number one goal, is to make money. So they're going to create packaging that is appealing. They're going to create advertising that's going to make you feel like you may be making the right decision when it comes to the food that you're buying. But that's not necessarily the case. And whenever we talk about trusting, these food companies and trusting the packaging and all these other things, I think that people think that these ingredients are heavily vetted, that, and obviously they're created in factories, and there is some testing when it comes to the ingredients, but we're essentially guinea pigs when it comes to a lot of these foods that we're eating. And that's why a lot of times we see things like the GMOs and trans fats that we have to backtrack on, because now that it has been, placed in these foods and people are eating them, we're having, prevalence of, cancers and heart disease and all these other things that have been increasing over the years. And we have to kind of take a step back and say, okay, what's causing these things? And then we come to find out that some of these ingredients and things that are allowed to be put in food are detrimental to our health. And so I think it's just a huge thing to not trust these food companies, and not even trusting the government with, the food decisions that we make. And, we also talked about this too as well, when it comes to, your doctor. The average doctor isn't heavily trained in nutrition. They're taught to diagnose and they're taught to treat with pharmaceutical drugs typically. And so that's not, saying anything bad about, doctors at all, because we're not doctors. And I tell people all the time, your doctor knows your health history. They know you better than anyone else does. But you also want to ask the right questions whenever you go to your doctor, when it pertains to just not accepting medicines and pharmaceutical drugs, at the first mention of it. Always ask, is there an alternate route? Is there things that I can do that, as it pertains to my lifestyle choices, that can help my health, or maybe even reverse some of the damage that has been done, over years of just making bad lifestyle choices. And so it's really about asking the right questions when it comes to the food decisions we're making. And even as it pertains to moving forward when it comes to correcting things that we have done to our bodies over an extended period of time. So I think those are the main things that we really wanted to talk about. But we also talked about food security too as well. One of the huge statistics that I brought up was that 40% of Black people have hypertension, while 20% of whites have hypertension. And obesity is higher by 10 to 20% among minorities. We even talked about the COVID statistic of how Blacks are 3 times more likely to die of COVID. And so I think it's important for us to as minorities to have a face or to have a say in this conversation, because it seems that we are the ones that are really falling victim to the food industry and the food decisions that we're making. And I truly believe that if people have the right information, if it's put, in front of them, that they'll make the right decisions. And so it's just about, having these conversations like we're having today, and actually really caring and wanting to help people make better food decisions. And so just really quick, go back and go quickly through it so we can kind of get moving on through the recap. Just understanding what real foods are. These are going to be the things that are in a U around the grocery store. One ingredient, there's not multiple ingredients in them. These are going to be your produce items and meat, poultry, those things of that nature, and that, the processed foods are going to be in the middle of the store. These are going to be the packaged items, highly processed foods, high in sugar, high in refined carbs, high in pretty much everything that is bad for you, and honestly, what's causing a lot of the chronic disease, that is here in the United States of America. And then also understanding that fat isn't bad. It's just the fats that we choose to use sometimes are bad for us, like the vegetable oils and the margarine, which can seem very, very deceiving. Like you read it and you're like, vegetable oil, that's got to be good for you, but it's not. And so I think that, talking about that and giving that information to people, is extremely important.
Yeah, thank you for that recap. I feel like that was perfect, like high level, everything that we touched on.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember everything we touched on.
That was so good. I was like, oh yeah, we did. Oh yeah, we did. So yeah, thank you for that.
Okay.
And to your point, yeah, I think that it is so important that we are present to the fact that this is how food impacts like our health, right? And how it literally fuels our body. And this conversation today is expanding upon that, because not only is it how, we function, but it also really impacts like our mood and like our outlook. And so we're going to dive into that today, because one of the questions that we asked people before this session was, what do you think? Do you think that it is the moods that we have that, go into the food choices we make? Or is it that, the food choices we make impact the moods that we have? So we're going to do like a little devil's advocate, like Stephen's going to take one stance and Josh is going to take another. And we have lots of good stuff. And so we're going to talk all about that. And so Stephen is going to kick us off talking about how our mood impacts our food. So, sir, if you would, please go ahead and take us away.
Awesome. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us in this talk. I think as we navigate through, this pandemic, is really important for us to be conscious of what we're putting in our bodies, but also our affective states. So one of the things that I wanted to start with is, what is mood? So in psychology, mood is an affective state. It's different from like our emotions or feelings. Moods are a little bit less specific. It's generally like it's a culmination of perceived experiences. So if you're in a good mood, you may have like a fuzzy feeling. It's honestly, moods are super non-descriptive experiences in life. And you can't really articulate them well. But one of the things that we've been noticing, especially with clients, is that when I ask clients about their nutrition, they usually have like a negative ideation or a negative mood when it comes to eating healthy. The assumption is like, okay, if I have to eat healthy, then that means I'm eating rabbit food and I'm eating really basic. And they're like, so what my clients, excuse my French, but what my clients call it, they call it the skinny bitch diet. And they hate it. And they're like, oh my God, like, I don't want to be on this diet. And they usually have like this negative valence towards the food that they're eating. And so typically what happens is that negative ideation imprints in the brain. So we have these lived experiences that we have, they get imprinted into the cellular underpinnings of our brain. So what happens is, if I think negatively about what I'm about to eat, that gets imprinted in my brain. And then if I keep having this experience, I keep thinking negatively about food, what happens is my brain is automatically going to go to that negative pathway. And every time I see salad, every time I see food less seasoned, or every time I see food that I perceive to be nasty, I'm going to go right down that negative ideation pathway. And what happens is you have this hormonal cascade that occurs that puts the body in a stress response. So everything is built around our vagus nerve. So there's an afferent and efferent nerve signals. So afferent going down to the rest of the parasympathetic system, and then you have your efferent is what the body is telling you about the stimuli that's coming in. So if I go to Whole Foods and I don't like sushi. If I go to Whole Foods and I go to the sushi bar, automatically that visual stimulation is going to come into my system, and I'm going to have a response of disgust because I don't like sushi, because the thought of eating raw fish is just like to me. So automatically I have a negative ideation about sushi, even though it may be delicious, even though how somebody cooks it may be different. I already have a preconceived notion in my mind about that food. So therefore my mood changes. And then if I were to eat sushi, automatically I'm going to have an autonomic response of disgust. So automatically my gag reflex is going to kick in, and my brain is going to tell me that this food is nasty, even though it may not be. But because I have a negative thought about it, it's already going to have a negative response in my body. So a lot of how we think about food dictates how we feel about it, and then also how it affects our physiology. We're less inclined to eat things that we think are nasty, and it's part of our like a survival response. Like, before civilization was what it is now, we had to taste things and see if we liked it and if it was poisonous or not. If it was poisonous, somebody ate it, they died, so you learned your lesson. But now it's a matter of saying, okay, everything is based on taste and context. So if it looks appealing, then that appealing stimulation is going to be more positive. It's going to have it's going to affect a more positive mood. Therefore, we're more inclined to consume that food and feel positive about it. But if food is less attractive, the stimulation does not sit well with us, then we're more inclined not to eat it. And that's how we see a lot of healthy foods. Like Josh was saying, the food industry is not built to be your friend. The food industry is built to serve the food industry to make money. It's not about making sure that you're healthy or providing you with the nutrients. If we actually broke down what is in fast food, the amount of micronutrients and phytonutrients that you'll find in a cheeseburger is minuscule in comparison to if you made it yourself. So that's just a little bit about mood. So then we go on to talk about food. So food, in my opinion, food is any type of nutrient source that provides minerals, phytonutrients, and the positive chemicals that support proper cellular function. Food determines smell, taste, look, texture, and all of that is built on the chemical underpinnings. So like how those things are like built together in nature. And what we found with food science, what we're finding is that how things are put together in nature, it's like the coding for performance. It's the coding for human performance. So if you want to perform better, you have to have the code in order to do that. So your cells are like little computers, right? And they're constantly waiting for the data to make them operate the way they're supposed to. The problem is with our lived experience, we're in such a rush to just get substance and sustenance that we don't think about the coding that goes into the cells. You cannot get the most effective performance or live to an affective performance if you're not putting in the right data. And so playing devil's advocate, looking at, I believe, you know, if we're looking at mood versus food, food versus mood, it's a 50-50 balance. But I think because I'm so much more on the mental, emotional, spiritual aspect of wellness, that I do think that how we think about mood, how we think about ourselves dictates food. It dictates what we're eating. So how are the two related? So just a little bit of nerdy science. And if it gets a little bit too much for you, you know, I will pull it back because I get in geek mode really quickly because I love this stuff. So under normal circumstances, food intake and energy expenditure, they're balanced by this system called homeostasis. So homeostasis is when our body is operating at an effective capacity to sustain itself. Okay, so our homeostatic system can sometimes be overridden by the activation of emergency response circuits that mediate feeding responses to emergent stressful stimuli. So that homeostatic state is not just, it's not static. It's fluctuating based on our environment and how we feel. So if we feel good, our homeostasis is going to be at a higher level. So like you think about a power grid. When energy is effectively supplied to the power grid, everybody has power, everything works well. When there's an energy deficit, nobody has power, right? So think of your body in that way. So if you think of your body positively and you say, I have power, I feel good, your homeostatic state is going to be higher. Your immune system is going to be higher. Your metabolic function is going to be that much more efficient. But when we're in a negative emotional state or a negative ideation, our homeostatic state decreases. And the reason why it decreases is because when we're in negative ideation, our body produces an influx of cortisol. So cortisol is one of those stress response chemicals that just completely overrides the system. It will literally make your body shut down and you literally cannot do anything. So the idea is how we think dictates our hormonal cascade, which dictates our behavior. So we think more positively, we behave more positively. And I know it's like, yeah, you're saying that. But if you practice it, it really does work, because the idea is, what I challenged myself and my clients this year, I said, is it possible to be happy, healthy, and snatched? And that is really, really hard, because when you're trying to be healthy and snatched, you got to give up something. And usually sacrifice is not easy, and it's not something that we desire to do. We want what we want when we want it, and we want it right now. And usually that is not how you get healthy. So that we tend to have a negative perception of health. We tend to have a negative perception of being snatched. And what happens is we create a negative ideation towards health and wellness and fitness. And that makes the struggle that much harder. That affects your homeostasis. So if I say that I'm going to get healthy, I'm going to work out, and every time I go to work out, I'm like, oh my God, I got to work out. Your workout is going to suffer because you don't have the right hormonal cascade to properly and effectively perform. So homeostasis, just the generic science term, is a property of cells, tissues, or organisms that allow the maintenance and regulation of stability and constancy needed to function properly. Homeostasis is a healthy state that is maintained by constant adjustment of biochemical and physiological pathways in an ever-changing environment. So as we move throughout our lived experience, our homeostasis is going to change. So like things that affect homeostasis, sunlight, the amount of sunlight that you get affects your homeostatic state. Whether you're hot or cold affects your homeostatic state. So homeostasis and metabolism, they run concurrently. So if you're in a healthy homeostasis, then your body temperature is going to be at a healthy level, as well as your metabolic function is going to move at a peak capacity. Now, if we're cold, our body tends to conserve energy, our metabolism slows down, we're not burning as much body fat because we're trying to hold on to it as a resource. So your homeostasis changes depending on your environment and external stimuli. Think of it this way. If you're afraid of dogs and a dog runs up on you, automatically you're going to have an autonomic stress response, and it's going to increase your breathing. It's going to increase blood flow. It's going to increase hyperventilation. Increased breathing is hyperventilation, but you're going to have all these physiological responses that makes your homeostasis spike, right? So then now you're in a stress response. So your homeostasis balance is now off center. So your mood shifts. So your physiology, so when your chemical and your physiological state changes, it dictates your emotional state, and that dictates your behavior. It's the same thing when you're at work and your boss is on your ass and you're stressed. When it's lunchtime, you don't want what you brought for lunch. You made your skinny bitch salad and your water, your lemon water, and you got your kiwis. You don't want any of that. You want something that's going to make you feel good. You're like, you know what? I'm having a really bad day and I want something that's going to make me feel good. So then we move on to food being opioidic, meaning that we derive pleasure from it. So what happens is I'm having a shitty day. I want a cheeseburger. I want a cheeseburger from the food truck across the street because I know they're going to put extra caramelized onions and bacon on it. And I love bacon. Now, I know bacon is not good for me, especially someone that has high cholesterol, but I want it because I know that it's going to make me feel better. So my mood, how I'm feeling currently, is making me behave poorly because it's causing my judgment to shift from what I should do to what I want. And that is a learned behavior. So now, anytime my boss pisses me off or stresses me out, I'm going to avoid what I should do and do what I want to do, which may not be better for me. And that becomes a learned response. That actually changes that shift, that feeling that you have in your body, and what you think actually changes the pathways, the thought pathways in our brain. So it goes from the frontal cortex, and then it goes to the thalamus, then it goes to the vagus nerve. So we're having this improper neural pathway activated because we're eating improperly. More so we're thinking improperly, which dictates an improper eating pathway. So what happens is typically food is not dopaminergic. It's like we eat to survive, right? We eat for performance, to function. So like the happiness that we get from eating good food is a byproduct, but that is not the purpose for eating food. The purpose for eating food is homeostasis. We want to maintain proper healthy function of our cells, tissues, organs, right? What happens is when we eat food, it produces a dopamine response. So dopamine is that pleasure chemical that you get. So you usually get it during sex. You usually get it from illicit drug use. You usually get it from like pretty much anything that makes you happy. Most of the bad stuff we're not supposed to do is where we get like a dopamine response. And I think even just doing bad things makes us happy. So we get a dopamine response. So like I was going back to the scenario where I'm in a bad mood. I want something that I'm not supposed to have, but I know that on the other end of it, I'm going to have this dopamine response. I'm going to feel so good. But the problem is that dopamine responses are short-lived. So they burn out. So then either two things happen. You feel really bad after you've done what you weren't supposed to do, or you want more. So you had this bad feeling that dictated your behavior. You lived in that behavior, and now you want more. So now you're learning that if I have a bad feeling and I do a bad behavior, I'm going to do more bad stuff. So our mood dictates behavior. So even taking it away from just how we look at mood and food, mood dictates behavior. That's the right overarching thing. It's like, let's think about like, let's sit in that for a minute, right? If I think negatively about myself and my perceived experience, and then I go and do something bad that makes me feel good, I'm learning that if I feel bad and I do bad things, I'm going to feel better. And that's a completely improper thought pathology. And that's one of the things that we want to fix, specifically when it comes to food. So
Steven, you mind if I had a point?
Yeah, definitely. Hop in.
No, like when you said that, it was just straight on point. And all I kept thinking about is that is such a double whammy whenever we talk about, as far as our mood impacts our food and our food choices, and how those the dopamine releases whenever we eat those foods like sugar, all the things that are bad for us. But those are also going to be the foods that have no fiber, no nutritional value, that leave us hungry. And so not only have we basically trained ourselves to go back to that food when it comes to, that dopamine release, we're still hungry. We're going to be hungry within an hour, 2 hours after eating that food, because there is no nutritional value. There is no fiber in those foods. The things that actually keep us feeling full is not in the food. So it's such a double whammy. So I'm glad you hit on that.
Yeah, definitely. Like, even if we take it, I'm gonna preach for a second. Even if we looked at mood affecting behavior, typically if we're in a bad mood and we go to exhibit a bad behavior, that the pleasure that derives from it is short-lived. And usually, and then we either need to do more of that bad behavior, or either we're left feeling empty. And that's because when we make bad decisions, they're empty. There's no substance in that choice. There's no sustenance to maintain you. And a lot of times, like we talked about this the other day, we have very short-sighted perceptions of our lived experience. Typically, we look at, okay, I just need to get to 12 o'clock. And then when you get to 12 o'clock, I just need to get to 6 o'clock. And when you get to 6 o'clock, I just need to get to sleep, right? But what if we started to plan out our day and effectively say, okay, how can I be strategic about my performance and my lived experience, and not just getting through today, but getting to tomorrow? Because typically when we eat, we say, all right, well, we wake up in a really good mood. We're like, let's go, let's get it today. I'm gonna eat clean. You eat gung-ho, you be super gully. You be like, yes, we're gonna work out today and it's gonna be amazing. Great day. And then that's when bad shit starts to happen. And then we don't plan for when bad things happen. So then we eat really badly in response to the bad thing happening to us. But if we plan for it and we prepared and we said, okay, bad shit is going to happen today, I'm going to meditate and I'm going to pray and I'm going to stick to my plan. And that helps you get over that hump. And then going even beyond that, saying, okay, now I'm sticking to my plan and the goal is to get to tomorrow. How do I keep getting to tomorrow rather than just getting through the day? So one of the things that Josh will probably talk about is the microbiota and how that affects our behavior and performance. So microbiota is all the bacterial organisms and parasitic organisms that live within our digestive system, our digestive tract, that usually consumes food and like kind of it releases specific, it catalyzes food, and then it releases specific hormones and chemicals into the gut, and that affects the bloodstream, and then that dictates behavior, other hormonal cascades and whatnot. I'm not going to get into it, but what we're finding is that there is a connection, the gut-brain axis, and what happens is the food that we consume dictates the chemistry of the brain. But there's a dichotomy in the theory that there's the brain-gut axis, that how we think about the food that we consume dictates the physiological response to food. So if I think negatively about food that I consume, my body is not going to break it down as effectively. So the idea is like, if I'm happy, even if I lie to myself and I say, I'm happy eating this salad, salad, salad. If I'm happy about eating that salad, I guarantee you, your body, listen, we laugh. Come on, it's serious. Like, if you think more positively about how we eat and what we eat, our body is in a more relaxed state. Everything about, like, even taking it away from food, when we absorb information in a relaxed state, it imprints more firmly in the brain. And the same thing with food. When we think about food in a positive light, our body is in a relaxed state. It's not in a negative response or trauma response. It's in a relaxed state, a homeostatic state. So then our body can function properly. Like, you think about it this way. You're like, oh my God, I got to eat another salad. Your cells are going to be like, salad, right? But if you're like, oh, I'm gonna eat this salad and I don't put apples and almonds and a little bit of shrimp, like you done made it look pretty. If you make it look pretty and it smells good, all that has a hormonal cascade. So what happens is we have these, we'll have a visual and we'll have, I forget what the nasal term for it is, but like a nasal stimulation that affects our nerve, our vagus nerve. And so the vagus nerve sends all these positive hormonal cascades down throughout the body. So it like really prepares you for eating. So now your gut is like, oh, we about to get some really good food. And now our body's going to be so much better for it. If we think about how we eat in the sense that, okay, I'm going to perform better, like even get beyond saying, okay, is this food really good? Think about food and saying, okay, I just want to get to the other side, right? Sometimes you can't think about, all right, this food is like, you could be eating the salad every day. You'd be like, I don't eat no more salad. But if you think about it this way, what I trick my clients into doing, I say, trick yourself. I'm going to look so good after eating this salad. Because sometimes bypassing the actual food that you're eating, you have to trick your brain into just getting to the other side. Because once you get there, you're like, oh, damn, I didn't even realize I had like 20 salads today, right? And you might be like fibered out. You're like, I don't want any more fiber. But it's so much better for your body. So taking it a step further, food, so our mood, when we think about food, is powerful. So when we eat poorly, so like I love Oreos. I am like obsessed with Oreos. I will eat, it's so bad, I will eat a pack of Oreos in like one sitting. Give me a half a gallon of milk, and mind you, I'm lactose intolerant. So you cannot be around me while I'm eating Oreos and cookies. It's so bad. Maybe that's an overshare.
Me too, man. I'm with you on that.
That might be a little overshare, but I feel like, we're being authentic. Like this is the place to do it. Can't nobody tell me nothing about my Oreos and my cookies. And I feel super powerful when I'm eating Oreos and cookies. Now I know good and well I should not be eating a whole pack of cookies, but I'm like, you know what? I feel good about it and I'm gonna do this. And I feel strong. I'm aggressive about it. And if anybody says anything about it, I'm going to be really angry, right? So what happens is when we think about things that make us happy, we have this, our body travels along that neural pathway, and it remembers the dopaminergic response that we had, that feel good feeling. Dopamine makes us feel good. We remember that and we're like, oh, I want more of that. So that puts me in a really good emotional state thinking about those Oreos. And I feel powerful in that because it feels good to me. Typically in psychology, when people do things that make them feel good about it, they feel really strongly about those things as well. So binge eating, we usually feel really good about it because it gives us a sense of control and satisfaction. And what happens is it soothes our stress response. The problem is that soothing that stress response, we're having an improper soothing. That's an improper soothing technique for stress. So our body has to not only calm ourselves down from the stress that we're experiencing, but now we got to deal with the blood sugar spike that we're about to get from eating a pack of Oreos. We got to think about the blood sugar spike from the milk. We got to think about all the excess fat that's in milk, all the processed hormones and chemicals that's in the milk. So now our body has to work overtime, is doing extra work in response to us making a bad choice about something that we ate. So just because it feels good and it tastes good doesn't mean that it's necessarily good for your body. Now, there are great things that are good for our bodies. We just have to be really conscious and educated about what we're consuming and how that affects our performance. So one of the things that I like to talk to people about is mood affects everything. Going back to the thought process about like when we're at work, typically when we go to work, if we are blessed to be able to do what we love, we we have a really positive ideation about it. You get happy. It starts first thing in the morning. You're like, oh, I'm going to work today and I'm going to talk to Sue and we're going to gossip and I'm going to see that cute boy Johnny, and I might even rub up on him. I'm going to look real good. I'm going to put my smell goods on. That's how I do. Listen, it is some fine men in the athletic department. Okay. And I'd be like,
the HR department.
listen, I'm being authentic and honest. Now, I don't touch nobody because,
you plotting.
I do be plotting. I'm just being authentic. So in the morning, I feel so good about going to work, not only because I love what I do, but I love the environment that I'm in. But my boss is a pain in my ass because he's a micromanager. So anytime he calls my phone, I'm like, automatically my body goes into stress response. So now everything after that stress response is going to be negative. And then what happens is you have this hormonal release based off of how I perceive my boss. So now my shoulders slump, I'm in a negative state, my body starts to stop functioning at that high level. Our body, like how we hold ourselves, how we think about ourselves dictates our behavior. And more so, it dictates the chemical underpinnings that go on in the body. So typically, when we have a negative stress response, what happens is that we have like this vasodilation of the gastrointestinal tract. And that typically starts to cause an increase in stress. What happens when the gastrointestinal tract starts to vasodilate, our body starts to produce, improperly produce ghrelin and leptin. So ghrelin is like the hunger hormone, right? It becomes a learned response. So every time my boss calls and he's getting on my nerves about something that I've already done or I already know what to do, I had this negative stress response, my shoulders slump, I get aggravated, my breathing increases, and then I start to get hungry. And I'm like, you know what? I just need a snack to deal with the stress of my idiot boss. What I'm learning though is that my body is not hungry. My body is producing more ghrelin hormone in response to my stress hormone. So if there's, so studies are showing that when there's an elevated level of cortisol, stress hormone, there's also an elevated level of ghrelin in the system. So cortisol, stress, ghrelin, hunger, stress and hunger are becoming we're learning that they're comorbid now. So that when I'm stressed out and I have a negative affect or negative emotionality, I also get hungry. But then what happens is I'm hungry when I'm not really hungry. I'm hungry because my body's producing more hunger hormone. And that's because my brain learned that, okay, well, the only way to make me feel good is to eat. And in order for my body to quantify me eating, it has to say, okay, well, you need to be more hungry. Right? Does that make sense? Well, hopefully it makes sense. So if I stress, I'm going to get hungry. And then if I eat, I'm going to feel good. And that's going to make me feel better. And that is an improper learned response. We don't want to eat in response to stress, a negative stress. Now, if it's for homeostasis stress, where it's like, okay, you need food, you need sustenance in order to maintain that homeostatic state, that's completely different. But that's not what we're doing. We're eating in response to stress. And that is what we want to do. That's what we want to break that mental pathology. Just a few more minutes. Give me 5 minutes. One of the things that also happens when we have a negative mood, there is a correlation between mood and dehydration. What happens is there's a correlation between cortisol and vasopressin, which is the chemical that tells the body, hey, you need more water. So like stress has such a negative, it's like cancer. I really think like when people be like, oh, I got cancer, and they be like, do you have cancer? Like, is it in your family? And they be like, no, I just got cancer. You be like, where did that come from? Stress. In my opinion, cancer is caused by stress. So if you can stop stressing, my opinion of type of faith that I got, I'm not going to get cancer. Okay. So studies are showing there's a couple studies showing that increased cortisol levels have also an increased vasopressin release, which means that the more that you stress, our body starts to go into dehydration mode. And what happens, the body starts to crave water. It is a survival response, yes, but those two things should not be paired together. There should not be a comorbidity between cortisol and vasopressin. And if you stressing causes your body to go into dehydration mode, that's a problem, right? The idea is that the response to stress should be a breathing pathology, effective breathing pathology, meditation, and acknowledging that the body is safe. What happens is we sit in that negative ideation, we sit in that stress response, which becomes traumatic for us, and our cells go into hyperdrive. And while the cells are in hyperdrive, they're using all their resources and it dehydrates the body. And what happens is vasopressin over time has this modulatory effect on fear, aggression, and anxiety. So the more that we're stressed, which increases dehydration, which dehydration increases fear, aggression, and anxiety. So it's like this negative, nasty cycle of stress, anxiety, aggression, stress, anxiety, aggression. And it all stems from our mood and how we think about ourselves in, you know, our current lived experience, our current state. Because moods, like I said, um, they're not static. Moods are, they ebb and flow, like, and they're not concrete. It's not like our feelings, like, you know, you're when you're angry. um but mood is like weird, like you really, like, even like scientists really can't describe it. It's just, it's this experience that has all these different types of expressions. Because my expression of a sad mood is going to be different from John's and Josh's expression of sadness. Um, and therefore we can't really put it in uh, we can't really describe it. So it's either a positive mood or a negative mood. We usually have positive valence or negative valence. You usually have a positive, we have a positive affirmative, um, um it's either positive and affirmative, or it's either aversive. Like, it's not, it's black, it's white, and then it's gray. It's not like emotionality where we can descriptively say or categorize it and say, okay, I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm angry, I'm content. Mood doesn't work that way. And so it's really important that we are conscious of our mood, because when we're not conscious of mood and we don't think about one thing that we have to do is we have to look at mood in the sense that it is individualistic, and that we need to be aware of the markers. That's why, you know, a bit of my practice is focused on having a deeper relationship with self, because how I experience a good mood is different from how Josh experiences a good mood. We were just talking about, like, how do you know if you're an extrovert? Everybody's lived experience is going to be different. And what I tell my clients is to look at the state that you're in. What is the expression of your current mood? Write it down, and then see if there is any concurrency with any other types of feelings, but then also see if that same experience is normal for you. You see if it's normal, because you check yourself. You say, okay, well, I had this feeling on Tuesday. I had this experience and feeling on Saturday. Then I had this experience on Monday. And then we start to look at all the things that it's tied to. So if it's tied to, like, for me, I know bad posture and overeating is tied to work, because my boss stresses me out. But if I choose to change my perception about how I look at my boss, that changes my mood, which dictates what I eat and how I eat, how I behave. So like I told Josh, this is definitely a longer conversation. And because I know we're all strapped for time, I want to make sure that I'm generous with others, with others, because I can talk for days.
Yeah,
But,
I told you to talk all you need, man, because this is all good stuff, man.
yeah, but I'm gonna go ahead and throw it to Josh.
Yeah, it was good that you mentioned the dehydration, because me and Jonna, we've been talking about this the other day, that there are times where that being dehydrated impacts my mood, and there have been times where I've been going throughout the day and I'm like, man, I feel icky. I don't feel good. I'm in a bad mood. I really don't know what's going on. And speaking of that whole self-awareness, like I have to kind of take inventory of what's going on and be like, okay, why do I feel this way? What's going on? Is it really my mood or is it something else? And there have been times that I've realized that I'm just dehydrated. That is what it is. And once I get some food, some sodium, some electrolytes, some things in me that that can rehydrate me, I feel 10 times better. And then I realized that that was the thing that was affecting my mood. And so that's kind of a good transition of how not just food, but I think this is more of a lifestyle choices conversation, and not just a food conversation, but how, a lifestyle choice of, not making sure that I'm hydrated can affect my mood. And even from a fundamental standpoint that we were talking, I think, Stephen, you mentioned earlier, just about being prepared for the day. And like for me, eating a whole foods diet, making sure that I'm getting the correct nutrients that my body needs, it helps me to get in a routine. It helps me to budget. When I'm on a routine, when I'm prepared, one, I'm more successful at the goals that I have when it comes to the food that I'm eating, and maybe even some physical goals that I have. And so fundamentally, food impacts your mood. Just getting yourself in a routine, and being prepared, you automatically feel better when you're prepared for the day, when hey, this is the food that I bought for the week, whether you're meal prepping or you're cooking each day. And it also helps you to not make bad decisions. And so for me, like if I know, hey, I spent, and Whole Foods can be a little bit more expensive than just the regular store. So if I'm like, hey man, I spent $125 at the grocery store on all these foods that are going to benefit me to live up to my full potential this week, I'm not at, 2 o'clock when I get hungry, going to swing by McDonald's. I'm automatically thinking like, hey, I've already spent this money. I'm already prepared for the week. I'm less likely to make a bad decision when I'm prepared for the week. And so just fundamentally, that's how, food can impact your mood. And getting into kind of like the technical side of things, I have a conversation with a lot of people when it comes to food and when it comes to how it impacts your mood, because I'm very open about like mental health, how you feel, things like depression, anxiety, because we all go through it. So we might as well talk about it. So that's just a conversation that I try to have, or, try to make a point to talk about whenever I'm talking with clients, friends, or whatever. And people don't really understand the technical aspect that, food has on their brain, and how what they eat can affect, how they feel from a day-to-day basis. And also using that as a step to get better. Most people don't look at that as a step to get better. When they think like, hey, I'm depressed, hey, I have anxiety, hey, I'm having trouble focusing or doing these things, they automatically look to other areas, and food's like the last place that people typically look to aid them, to help them to feel better. And I'm like, no, like that is like one of the top things that you should be, looking at. One of the things that I talk to people a lot about is, omega-3 fatty acids, and DHA being one of those things. And so whenever you talk about omega-3 fatty acids and DHA, it is the top structural component of the brain. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. That is science. And it's accumulated during the third trimester to actually form the brain. The frontal lobes are dependent on DHA for development. And DHA is vital for brain function, vital for cognitive skills, vital for, focus, and being able to achieve like goals and tasks. That's what all happens in the frontal lobes. And so whenever we talk about the technical aspect, and you think of it like, okay, this thing that I know exists, omega-3 fatty acids, thing that, that has been, talked about a lot in the past few years, that I know is a thing that I can find in food, is found in my brain, and is actually a key structural component of my brain. It makes you think like, okay, well, maybe there is some, effect that the food that I eat has, on my brain, and those things. And so it makes people kind of take a step back and say, okay, maybe food does affect my mood. Maybe it does have some type of effect on our brain. And so even you think about omega-3s, that is an essential fatty acid, which means that, we have to find that in an external food source. And so, making sure that we are making smart decisions when it comes to the foods that our body and our brain needs. And so if you think, or that DHA is a structural component of your brain, why wouldn't you consume that? Why wouldn't you give it a try to see if that, would help you? So lifestyle choices that affect inflammation and things like free radicals, or, processed foods, omega-6s, sugar, and, even cigarette smoke. And so these are going to be the things that cause inflammation. And we mentioned inflammation earlier, and that's something that we talked about in the last conversation I had with John, and understanding that we can have inflammation internal, and that is a source of chronic disease, but also thinking about free radicals, which can damage cells and can damage tissues. And so whenever you hear that and you're like, okay, these things can cause inflammation, these things can cause cell damage and tissue damage, you have to look at those things. It's like, maybe I should not be consuming them, and maybe those things can affect how I feel, even down to my mood. And so those things can affect your brain function, can affect your mood, your cognitive function, and even contribute to things like memory loss. And so even on the other side of that, lifestyle choices that protect us from those things and provide our brain and our body with the necessary things that it wants and it needs, or the things like antioxidants that protect ourselves from damage from the free radicals, or the omega-3s that protect us from those free radicals and things that can be damaging to our cells. And so whenever we know these things, and we know it from a technical aspect, I think it becomes a little bit more easier to make better decisions, to know like, hey, this really does affect me. And so, kind of helping and guiding people to make decisions to stay away from the processed foods, the sugars, the refined carbs, and all the things that are man-made that can be damaging to not only our physical health, but our mental health too as well. And I think there's just there's so much of a connection on the physical, like our bodies and the way we look, that we don't talk enough, or don't think enough about how that really affects our brain and the mental too as well. And so I think, Stephen, you mentioned earlier about our microbiome. So serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter, it helps regulate sleep, helps regulate our mood. Up to 90% of serotonin is produced in the GI tract. The thing that regulates our sleep, regulates our mood, is produced in the GI tract. And so whenever we talk about, that connection between the gut and the brain, it is very real. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Like, this is science. This is, something that has been proven. And so I think there's not enough people that understand and can grasp that concept. And that's why when John was like, hey, we should talk about this, I'm like, yeah, we definitely need to talk about this, because it's something that isn't in the forefront, that a lot of people understand or even get when it pertains to food, and how that actually affects our mood. And so, those good bacteria, which there are trillions of bacteria in our gut, the good bacteria is what creates that serotonin, which affects our mood and regulates our sleep. And we have to feed those good bacteria. And so whenever we talk about feeding those good bacteria, those are going to come from the whole foods that are high in nutritional value. And then whenever you talk about, the bad bacteria that is in our gut, what's going to feed that are the processed refined carbs, sugar, pretty much all the things that are bad for us, and that negatively affects our mood. And so I think when we get to a understanding that is standard when it comes to food and mood, that our gut and our brain have a bigger connection than most people realize or even think. And so I think it's just important that we talk about those, and also understand that we have to protect ourselves from inflammation, from those free radicals, and to make sure that we are giving our body and our brain what it needs to function properly. And so I don't want to take up too much time, because I want to allow some time for questions. So I don't know, Jonna, if you got questions that people had, or if anyone has any questions that they want to interject, or we can continue having this conversation.
Yeah, we have some pre-submitted questions, but also I think I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Stephen, when is your single salad dropping?
Is that like it? You mean like the proprietary skinny bitch salad?
Yeah, like you said that whenever you're in a good mood about it, and I do a happy dance whenever I eat good tasting foods, but I think that salad might be like the next banger.
It's more so it's a thought process. So it just like really quickly. When I got out of, I ran track, and I did martial arts in college. That's how I went to college. I got injured my last year, 2 knee surgeries later. I got into powerlifting, hurt my back, aggravated sciatica. So between being on steroids and like being really depressed, I got to like 250 pounds. And so my sister, who was like CrossFit champ, well, functional fitness champ in Maryland, my mom called her and was like, your brother has lost his mind. And I literally had lost my mind. Like that's where the like eating a pack of Oreos started. I would literally eat like a pack of Oreos a day. It was bad. And my sister came up and she threw all my food away. And then she went shopping, and then she was like, you're now on the skinny bitch diet. And so like, it was just like nothing but like whole foods. And how I perceived food was like really negative, and the idea it's a play on the verbiage is negative, but the food is actually positive, and it's a joke between us. It's a joke that I have with my client, because typically when you think of a skinny bitch, you're like, they're emaciated, they're like nasty, they're like, you have like this vision in your head, but it's the actual diet is completely opposite of that. It's super nutritious, it's super healthy. Like it focuses on providing everything that you would need to maintain proper homeostasis. And understand, there are skinny female bitches and there are skinny male bitches, okay? Being a Black gay man, I know plenty of skinny male bitches, so this is not just targeted at any one sex. It's generalized, but yeah, it's the like I said, it's a play on words. And so just a little bit about my journey. When I was losing my sister, she has a nasty mouth. As you see, I have a little bit of a nasty mouth myself. She came up, my sister, she has like abs for days. And so it was bad. And so she was like, you see that? And I was like, she was like, what do I see? And I told her, and I was like, just being genuinely authentic. I was like, I see a fat bitch. And so she got so upset that I saw myself that way. She was like, that is not what I see. That is not. And how we perceive ourselves is so important, because me seeing myself in a negative light dictated my behavior. So I ate horribly. When I started to see myself as something other than what I had made up in my mind, once my weight loss started, it was easy. Eating became easy because I saw myself in a positive light, but more so, I saw myself rather than where I currently was, and more so where I wanted to be, and the life that I wanted to live, and what I wanted to do with my life. And that's how I lost the weight. That's how I maintained my wellness. That's how I maintain my wellness. So
Thank you for sharing that. I feel like that was really vulnerable. And I think that, from listening to all your knowledge and expertise, like I wouldn't have known that. I didn't know that. And so, yeah, I think that is just like a testament to the type of change that, we can all have, because the information's out there. It's just a matter of like, seeking it out or putting the people around you that actually like have these conversations. And so for those that are tuning in or tune in a little bit later, so whenever Stephen was talking about how mood impacts food, he was talking about how like the way that we feel about food. And so it's not just like, oh, I've got to eat rabbit food, but it's like, salad, And so that was what I was wondering, like when that song's going to be dropping. Because yeah, I think that
we can make it together.
Oh,
salad song together.
That would be fun.
And it'll go viral.
Yes. Oh my God, that would be so fun. Okay, cool. So other than that question, there were a couple more. Let me pop on here. So one of them was, how do we ensure we're eating the right foods? So we learned last time, whenever Josh and I did Nutrition Basics 101, that the labels can be misleading. So like Josh touched on whenever we first got on, it says it's like a lot of protein, and then, it's really like not. And so Josh touched on that in the beginning, talking about making sure you eat, like you shop the perimeter. And also looking at the labels, because one of the things that we also talked about in terms of like the marketing and like the verbiage used on the labels was that, if you can't pronounce the ingredients, you probably don't want to buy it, because like your body, like that's weird. Like it's foreign. It was created in a lab. And so your body knows how to process ingredients, apple, right? But if it's ingredients like, I don't know what the fuck, then it's going to not be able to, as Stephen spoke about, like metabolize it as efficiently and, get the nutrients that you need. Do either of y'all have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I guess that's why I'm such an advocate for a whole foods diet, because that kind of leaves all the guessing out. Like whenever you talk about whole foods, it is what it is, a whole food. It's one ingredient. And it can be tricky whenever you're shopping at a grocery store and you're buying packaged foods, because you can, first of all, the packaging has been misleading, but even when you turn over that packaging, it's like reading a foreign language. You're reading through these ingredients lists and you're like, well, what's that? Like, and then it gets to a point that even on the ingredients list, there are things that are misleading. Whenever we were talking about vegetable oils, like I can't count how many people that think that vegetable oil is healthy. It's not their fault. It sounds bad, but I mean, the food companies did the job that they meant to do. They meant to, advertise it as such, and it worked, but it's not true. And so even from that, and even to the millions of names that they have for sugar now, it's like whenever you look at a package, like sometimes it's not just gonna say sugar in the ingredients list. There's so many other different names that they try to hide sugar under. And so it really is tough trying to eat healthy and eating the proper foods to prevent chronic disease and to be the healthiest version of yourself if you're buying processed foods. And so, that's why I'm such an advocate for a whole foods diet, because that leaves all the guesswork out. You know what you're eating. And even Stephen mentioned it earlier, I'm a huge advocate of preparing your own food, because you know what goes in it. And so, I'd rather cook a burger at home than go to McDonald's and get a burger, because God knows what's in that burger, but I know what I'm going to put in my burger. And so, whenever we talk about trying to ensure that we're, eating the right foods, like if you stick to a whole foods diet, like that leaves the guesswork out. And if you're buying processed foods, read the labels. But even then, it's still tough whenever you're reading the labels, because you almost have to damn near be a food scientist to understand what the fuck's in the food. So
Yeah.
that's my input on it.
Yeah, thank you for that. And just to be clear, so for anyone listening and watching, whenever we say whole foods, we don't mean like the store, grocery store Whole Foods. We literally mean like actual whole foods that are not processed, that are like chicken, or that are, like apple, and not anything that's like lab made, or basically is like what we're trying to say whenever we're using that verbiage. And I think that, to your point, yeah, like it's a lot of times people are like, yes, like I'm going to do this, I'm going to make this change, and then they start, buying these things that are packaged and marketed to us as healthy, but really aren't. And so it's like you can't get ahead, because like you're being sabotaged, because like Stephen pointed out, and like Josh and I spoke about last time, the food industry just wants your dollars. Like they don't want your health, because they want you to keep buying these foods that are cheap for them, and they're going to put more money in their pockets at your expense. So yeah, on the first question, making
Yeah.
sure that, yeah, you are eating, to Josh's point, the whole foods. And then, yeah, just being really like conscious, because even with whole foods, and we spoke a little bit about this last time in terms of like GMO and like the pesticides they spray on them. Um, we really don't know what these pesticides are doing. Like we have some studies and some research, like Monsanto, um, like obviously they have a lot of money, so they're able to pay people to keep this stuff under wraps and not actually tell you like what has happened from people who have either lived next to a field where their pesticides are sprayed on them. um, like Josh and I spoke, whenever you see these different like images, like they're wearing like hazmat suits whenever they're spraying the pesticides on the foods that we are eating.
Like,
And
there's no way that's good for you. No way.
no
You know
way.
what? It goes a little bit deeper. It's not just the pesticides, it's the preservatives that they put in your food. So like a lot of these companies that have like prepackaged meals, like I'm not gonna say any names because I'm not gonna drag anybody, but like these mail to like you order online and they deliver it to your door. They have these prepackaged meals. They come with recipes. A lot of how they package their meat, they have preservatives in them, and the preservatives, as much as we want to keep the food like fresh and healthy, it is not natural of how they keep food natural. Like, so I am a big proponent of going to the fish market, going to the meat market. I don't really shop at the grocery. I try to stay away from shopping at the grocery store. If I am going to the grocery store, I'm getting fresh meat and then I'm freezing it myself. I'm not getting prepackaged meat that's pre-frozen. Like even the meat that you buy at the butcher's counter, it has some preservatives on it, but it's not as bad as the stuff that's prepackaged. Not just that, but then also saying the it goes so much further than just the pesticides. You have to figure that we live in a world where um, our food isn't just genetically modified. We have insects that are genetically modified. So what they're doing is they cross pollinate a lot of insect species so that they cross genetically modify species so they can have more pollination. But what happens is that when insects pollinate different plants and which are needed for the plants to grow effectively, a part of their DNA is deposited during pollination. So whatever they're modifying these animals with, these insects with, is what is getting into our food. So like we have to really, really be careful. Like our Food and Drug Administration has gotten really lax because our oversight has waned over years because we are just distracted by so many things. But it's really important that we start to hold our public officials accountable, hold our these administrations accountable, because if we let them, they'll just do whatever with our food. I'm super big with supporting uh, farms, like local farms and farmers markets. One, the food taste is so much better. Anything that is farmed by Amish people, I love it because they make it with love and you can taste it in the food. It's sweeter. It's just better. So like I tell people that you want to live a healthier life, go to a plate, know where your food is being grown, know how they make it, and cook it yourself. And I think that is the best way to go about like living a healthy life. Like, yes, eating the whole foods, but also know where your food comes from. And most of the farms that are really good, especially if they're local, and they thrive off of like local marketing and going to farmers markets. They don't mind telling you what they're doing. They actually want you to know because that helps to increase the buy-in and the support for their farms. So I would definitely do if you can shop local at local farms, shop. You might have to drive an extra 20 miles, but long term your health is going to be better. You're going to be supporting your immediate community, and you know exactly what's in your food.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, Stephen, whenever you talk about shopping local, at farmers markets and stuff like that, a lot of times people can, be like, oh man, it's less convenient, it's a little bit more expensive, but basically you're paying for your health on the front end. And so for me, and John have talked about this whenever we talk about buying foods with the least amount of intervention. So if you can buy, organic, sustainably raised, like the whole nine, we don't have to get into that. But obviously, yes, it's going to be more expensive. It's a little bit more expensive for those farmers and the people that, cultivate these items to be able to get it to the market to sell it, to us. And so, yes, you're paying a little bit extra, but you're paying on the front end for your health. And for me, it's just if I have to cut in other areas of my life, like say, hey, I need to, cut hell, if I need to cut Netflix or whatever, 10, 20 bucks here to make sure I have that 10, 20 extra bucks, to spend on food that I know that is going to be beneficial to my health and also beneficial to the environment, it's well worth it. And so, I just want to kind of put that out there to try to put some effort towards making cuts if you have to. That may not be an issue for some people, but I know a lot of times people can make the excuse like, I really don't have the money or the time, or, I can't, it's like, is your health important? If your health's important, you'll figure it out. So, I just wanted to kind of add that to what you said.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and there's, you can like I know in Philadelphia, I know in a lot of urban areas, they have like local like farmers markets, not farmer, like community gardens. Community gardens, they are super big into educating people about how to grow their own food and also supplying the community when there's deficits. So you can definitely it's give and take. So like if you find a food market that has really great meat, you get your meat there, but you can also go to a community garden and get really good fruits and vegetables. Not just that, you donate your time, they'll supplement that for like payment. So like there's ways to be healthy, and not just that, like you were talking about the sustainability in our environment. Like how we grow food in America is horrible. Like it is horrible on our environment, but that's like a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, thank you both for that. That actually answers the second question, which was how do we switch from fake foods to healthy foods when healthy foods are so much more expensive? And Josh and I have spoken about this, and like you both just pointed out now, there are so many benefits to, paying a little bit more, whether that be environmental for like our own health. What Josh was meaning whenever he said you're paying for it on the front end is that like whenever you don't eat these healthy foods, not to be like, like forecasting, but typically what happens is there's going to be a detriment to your health somewhere down the line that you're going to have to pay for, whether that be, to Stephen's like acknowledgement, like cancer or these other like diseases and, you know, situations where they end up being pretty dire and you're having to like get on medication to band-aid the problem, when if you would have just like, fueled your body on the front end, to use Josh's term, then you would be better off. And so um, that's like a great answer to question number 2. And so is there anything else that y'all want to add on that? The last thing I do want to say, Josh and I had spoken, yeah, it's more expensive, but like it's not like it's double the price. It's
exactly.
Like, what was the percentage? Do you remember?
It's like you're going to be paying 20-25% at the most more than what you normally would pay. I think people think, oh, it's way more expensive. Like if you would normally pay, $100 for groceries, and also you have to factor in what you normally buy. Like if you're buying a bunch of crappy things like Oreos and frozen pizzas and stuff like that, you have to kind of factor that into your budget for groceries each week. But like if for me, if I'm going to pay $100 for groceries one week and I don't buy organic, or I try to buy local at the farmer's market and things like that, and I pay $100. If the next week I try to say, okay, I'm going to try to buy organic this week, sustainably raised, try to buy as local as I possibly can, I'll probably spend $130 versus $100. So it's not like I'm spending $200 more. It's not as expensive as some people try to make it out to be. And that's why I mentioned earlier, like, hey, if you can cut in other areas, like 10, 20, $30, like that's enough. Like you don't have to have an extra $100 to do what Steven's talking about whenever you talk about shopping local. If you have an extra $30 to spend, I truly believe that you can make it happen, not just for you, but for your family too as well.
Yeah.
One of the things that I do, what I tell clients, you have, like we were talking about preparation strategy. So what I have found to be successful for me, um, everybody knows that people get food stamps on the 15th and the 30th. Okay. So food is cheaper in the middle and the beginning of the month. So what I do is I tell all my clients, whether they're wealthy or they're working class, go at the beginning of the month, go and buy your meat at the beginning of the month or either on the 15th. Check the dates, and then you bulk up on your meat. And then each week you should not be buying food once a month. Because one, you're not going to stay on track with your food. You're going to forget what's in the fridge, and you're going to wind up buying more than what you need. So what I tell clients to do: buy your meats all at once. Start really planning out. So literally, like, you can buy like ground turkey, you could buy fish, you could buy chicken, and you can buy beef if that's what you eat. Those are 4 meats, and you got 4 weeks in a month. So each week you'll have a different protein for the week. You plan out your recipes, and then each week you just grab new fresh vegetables, fresh fruits. You will actually spend less money. You'll spend less money doing it that way than if you try and buy everything once, or if you try and just strictly stick to buying groceries twice a month. Because if you do the 1st and the 15th, you're going to wind up, I guarantee you, you're going to go and you're going to be hungry while you're shopping, and you're going to overbuy. You're going to buy something that you already have. You're going to get home, put it away, and be like, damn it, I already had this. But if you are shopping weekly and keeping a list of what you consume, especially if you have the recipes, you know what's in your house. That way you're not overbuying stuff. And then also it increases food diversity. So that way you can buy different things. Like, we get accustomed to buying the same thing over and over again. And the food industry knows this. So what happens is we buy the same thing over and over again, or the same thing that everybody else is buying. They raise the prices. But if you diversify what you're eating, like, I look for sales. I look for stuff that's not on, like whole wheat pasta. I look at quinoa. Like, when that stuff is on sale, that means that people aren't buying it. And that's when I get it. And that's how I kind of base my meals. So I think just having a strategy when it comes to grocery shopping, but just overall, that's part of your strategy to eat.
Damn, we could have a whole talk on that.
Yeah.
That plan. Yeah, that's smart. Thank you for sharing that. We've got about 7 minutes, so I will wrap this up really quick. If anyone has any questions, do pop them in the chat so we can answer them for you. The last 2 questions that were pre-submitted were, what if I just don't like the taste of healthy foods? And Josh and I have talked about this. Stephen and I have talked about this. Like, you probably just have not been eating it like prepared properly, or prepared like in a tasty way. Because, like, it's interesting. I spoke to them separately, and both of y'all brought up Brussels sprouts.
Well, that's because I've always, anytime in the past I've had Brussels sprouts, they've been boiled and soggy and it tastes terrible. And so a lot of times when people, number one, our taste buds are hijacked. You know what I mean? And so when your taste buds are hijacked, of course, if you've been eating, sugary foods with Doritos, everything, all these things with refined carbs, one, your taste buds are hijacked, and you have to make a transition. And so it's not going to be overnight. Like we talked about, cutting out sugar. And once you finally get to the point where you fully cut out like processed sugar out of your diet, things like, at least for me, like frozen blueberries taste like candy to me. But it took some time to get to that point of cutting out all the sugars that hijack my taste buds. And so it's a process that doesn't happen overnight. So, I think that's the most important thing. And then the next is, a lot of times people are preparing their foods in extremely bland ways that I wouldn't even eat them. And so there's ways to cook your food that it tastes good, but also keep in mind that your taste buds are hijacked, and then it does take some time to take them back from the foods that have hijacked them. So, that means slowly but surely cutting out, all the things that have hijacked them, like sugar and, refined carbs.
And Google is your best friend with like recipes. Go ahead, Stephen, my bad.
To answer the last 2 questions, I think like what I tell clients and what I do for myself, one of my exes, he's a chef, and his philosophy, he does my meal prep. His philosophy is over season your food, not salt. No over salt, because you can't fix salt, but you can rinse them seasonings off. But there's a way that, like, so I make my own salad dressings. I make my own broths. I like There's a way for you to season your food with it being delicious and nutritious. Um, I think also, like Josh was saying, our taste buds are hijacked. You figure, like, you're introducing new information to your body, so it takes time for your body to interpret the data and to imprint it and encode it. So it's like you're learning. You have to. It's not just, okay, I don't like the taste of foods. You don't know those foods. So your body has to learn them. And then when you learn them, you're like, oh, okay, I like this now. Like, I'm lactose intolerant. I'm not as, like, I don't get the same response when I eat yogurt. I love ice cream. I can't have ice cream. It spikes my blood sugar. It just has too much sugar content. So I do vanilla Greek yogurt, which has less fat, less sugar. I freeze it. What I'll do is I'll put a little bit of honey, maybe a half a teaspoon of brown sugar, some cinnamon, and some blueberries in it. I freeze it, and I got a blueberry frozen yogurt. So it's how do we make things delicious based off of what we already know we like, and how can we supplement certain foods for other foods that are better. It's all about making better choices, and then ultimately it's goal setting. What is it that I'm trying to accomplish? Do I want more energy? Do I want to lose body fat? At the end of the day, we want to live a better life. We want to be happier, and that's encoded in our food. Happiness is encoded in food. Literally, the chemicals that you need to have a proper happy chemical response is in your food. So if you start eating foods that once they get into your microbiome, they release certain chemical responses that's going to make you happier, you're going to eat more of those foods. And so much is, okay, let me make it in a way that tastes good to me, but also what's the feeling on the other side of me eating? That's what I'm chasing. I'm chasing that feel good feeling. And you eat when you're hungry. But that requires that you really get to know your body and know when you're hungry. You get on a schedule. So um, I consume my protein twice a day, and early in the morning around 7 a.m. and in the afternoon, which are, like, for me, are optimized time. I need at least 8 hours in between, well, 6 to 8 hours in between when I consume protein, because it takes me a little bit longer to break down protein. And I'm really conscious of the proteins that I consume, because I want slower processing proteins, which that's a whole nother conversation. And then I only consume carbohydrates in the morning, because it takes, and I eat slow processing carbohydrates, one, because I don't want to spike my blood sugar and I want that long lasting energy throughout the day. I usually don't consume carbs. If my day is off, I try not to consume them past 3 o'clock, because I know that I'm gonna gas out by like 7 o'clock. So, like, if you consume, in my opinion, if you consume carbs later in the day, your body is trying to break down those carbohydrates, depending on what they are. Your body's trying to break them down and use them at the same time, and you're just gonna gas out. So, yeah, I think carbs earlier in the day, protein earlier in the day, focus on your fiber, and your, like, low glycemic index carbs later in the day.
Yeah, thank you for that. What were
Yeah,
you gonna
I
say?
think. I was just gonna say, I think they're optimal. Stephen's talking about, there obviously are optimal times during the day, especially for certain people when it comes to eating certain things. But one thing that I've found, with clients a lot of times is you may give them this idea that, hey, you need to eat 6 meals, 6 small meals throughout the day. And that sounds awesome. That sounds great. There's nothing wrong with that. That works for some people. But I have found that, people end up falling off the wagon because they think that that is the gospel and that is the only way. And then they're like, well, I can't eat 6 small meals a day. And they just completely give up, and that's it. And they just throw everything out the window. And so typically my advice when people ask, like, when exactly do I eat, it's a case by case situation. And so that's why a lot of times when I'm helping people, we talk, we have conversations. I have a consultation with them. I ask questions like, when are you typically hungry in the day? Like, what is your eating schedule currently? What is your work schedule? Like, I ask all these questions so that way we can cultivate a plan. And that's the key, a plan that is going to work best for them and that's going to be sustainable, not for a week, not for a month, not for a year, but hopefully, their entire lives. And, that's ultimately where I want to get people at, to a point where they really feel like, whether it happens or not, but where they really feel and are confident that the track they're on is something that they can sustain for the rest of their lives. And so I think the question of when do you eat is a case by case situation. And it comes to, kind of your work schedule, lifestyle, the whole nine, and to not get too caught up on like having to eat at this certain time or this amount of meals throughout the day, when we probably should just be focusing on like the content of like, what are you consuming? And let's at least just start there. So
Yeah, well said, both of you. Thank you for sharing that. I think you both raised very important points. And my 2 cents on it is, just to like piggyback off of what you said, is yeah, I think that we get so caught up in like, there's so much, right? Like we've talked for 90 minutes about food and like how it impacts like our mood. Josh and I spoke like 90 minutes the last time. And so it can be overwhelming, and people see like what works for others and we're like, well, I have to do that because that was successful for them. When really you need to, take a pause and see what is true for you. And like Josh spoke about, like, what does your lifestyle look like? Like Steven spoke about, like, he's very conscious and intentional with like how he eats, but that didn't happen because he woke up one day and was like, let me salad dance. And like, this is like how it's going to be from here on out. It's because like it happened from a lot of research and like time and like patience and like trial and error. And, based on your goals, what is it? Like, are you trying to, just like, trying to get through the day? Like what is it that is true for you like right now? And that's going to change over time. So intuitive eating, I think, is like something to really look into if you're considering like, like where to start. Because a lot of times people see these other things like, oh, I need that for a 6-pack, like Josh spoke about, because we see that, we can see the change. Like we go for these external factors because that's an obvious like manifestation of like the control that we have, because we all want to be in control. And so, with that, like that's what we go for, when really it's like, are you getting your micronutrients? Are you eating like, to fuel and perform? Like, are you eating for like health and like wellness and happiness, and not just like to get this, like to look a certain way? Because you can look good and be really unhealthy. Look good, like whatever that means for you. Like you can look fit and have like this epitome of like what like the quote unquote standard is. What the fuck does that even mean? And we spoke about that some last time.
yeah.
But yeah, so it's really getting intentional and like intuitive about what your goals are at the moment. And I think another good place to start is like, are you even eating enough? Because a lot of people like aren't even eating like enough food. And so before you start to figure out like what, when to time it, intermittent fasting, like, should I, do it this way? Should I do it that way? 6 meals a day, like Josh said, like, what's the content of your meals? And like, are you eating enough to actually fuel your body? Because your body needs a certain amount of calories just for like bodily functions, like breathing and like, brain function. So a lot of people don't consider that because again, they want that 6-pack or they want that like butt or whatever it may be. So with that being said, we're 4 minutes over. So we'll go ahead. I didn't see any questions in the chat, but if you have those, we're going to start wrapping it up. So do go ahead and enter them in. But if you found this of value, we recorded it. So if you want to direct message me your email, I can send you the replay. I'm happy to do that so that you can share it with anyone that you think might find this of value. If you're interested in connecting with us, just to see what else we share, I wanted to mention earlier, whenever Josh was talking about the different names for sugars, like he made a great Instagram post about that the other day that listed a bunch of different names. Really valuable resources. Steven posts a lot about like what he's got going on, and he's doing like awesome things. So you can follow him on Instagram or check out his website for that. And then I post things regarding to like mental health and nutrition and basically like your different perspectives. So you can find all of us. Here are our websites, and our Instagrams. So Josh, I'm just going to read off the Instagrams really quick. It's going to be Joshua James with 2 M's. Steven's Instagram is Steven Westbrook the third. So I is there at the end. And then I'm Soul Searching and Squats on Instagram. So that's where we spend a lot of time. You can also check out our website for more information. But other than that, that's all we have for you today. Unless you two want to add any closing remarks or anything, feel free.
Yeah, only thing I'll say just really quick, because I know we talked, a lot, it's a lot of information in this conversation, and obviously you record it so people can come back and talk to it. I think the biggest thing is, one, understanding that food doesn't impact your mood does impact your food, they're all intertwined. Understanding those things and understanding the impact that your food decisions have on your life that's like the number one thing. And then number two, is kind of being super self-aware and understanding what you really want, not just out of food, but out of life, and how food pertains to that, and just really thinking about that and coming up with an action or a plan moving forward. So, take this information and just apply it to where you're currently at, in your journey when it comes to life.
Yeah, that's well said.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of information, and we're resources. I'm big on giving information away for free. So use me, reach out, any questions that you have. But I think the best thing that you can do for your wellness is to educate yourself. No amount of information that I provide you with is going to educate you or empower you in the same way that you seeking it out yourself. In the same way that I can tell you how to exercise, can tell you what to eat. None of that matters unless you figure it out for yourself and you figure out what works. We can guide you to, and we can show you how to use the tools, but ultimately it is your journey and you have to define it for yourself. So that's what we're here for. We're here to guide you. So hopefully you were blessed by our humor and the content that we share with you, because we're passionate about it. Because essentially we just want to see you guys well and live a well life. So,
Wow.
yeah, let us know if you need help.
Thank you. That was, I'm like, what do I say after that? I'm just like, retweet. Like, I don't know. That was thank you both. Like, yeah, I think if there are ever parting words, like those are great ones. And yeah, like to both your points, yeah, like we're all on individual journeys and we can sit here and like talk about what's worked for us and what we've seen work for others. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's a matter of figuring out what works for you. And we had written some key takeaways. I'm just going to run through those really quick, and then we'll say our farewells. But whenever we were, thinking about like, what do we want everyone to like get from this? We came up with like a few key things. Josh and Stephen both touched on them, but there were a couple others, and that was how people perceive healthy food needs to change. So, we think of it as like, it's this detrimental, like, oh, well, God, like it's rabbit food or whatever your previous experience is. And the connotation that healthy food isn't as tasty as like the bad foods is just untrue. Our food choices and our mood choice or our moods impact each other. And then whenever we're considering how do we change, like as individuals, focus on creating a better relationship with food and with your bodies. So again, that's going back to both your points, just, learning what it is that works for you. And so with that being said, you know where to find us. Like Stephen said, use us. We're here to serve. So thank you all for your time, and we'll see you next time.
So yeah.
Bye.